members who are hoping that I'm about to announce some air travel resumption and possible December holiday destinations, I'm sorry I will disappoint you.
No cause for celebration just yet, but Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung says Singapore will negotiate air travel bubbles for general travellers.
Day 1 of 4. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong takes the stand in his defamation case against blogger Leong Se-hian.
And back at the White House, US President Donald Trump downplays COVID-19 after leaving hospital.
I know there's a risk, there's a danger, but that's okay. And now I'm better, and maybe I'm immune, I don't know.
It's 5:30 p.m. here in Singapore. You're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Haryanto Diman.
I'm Dylan Ang. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
Today in Parliament, Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung said COVID-19 testing is key to unlocking air travel and Singapore regaining its air hub status. And in the coming months, Changi Airport will set up a dedicated testing laboratory.
However, Mr. Ong acknowledged that while the current situation is much better than in March when Singapore shut its borders, it's still much too soon to open up travel to everyone.
I need to manage expectations here. For members who are hoping that I'm about to announce some air travel resumption and possible December holiday destinations, I'm sorry I will disappoint you. The fact is that borders are still closed for most parts of the world. Some countries, such as Germany, only allow business travelers from Singapore. And to the best of my knowledge, only a handful of countries, US, UK, Turkey, Maldives, allow general travelers from Singapore. We cannot control what other countries want to do with their borders, but we can control ours. To welcome back visitors, bring back jobs, revive our air hub safely.
To welcome back visitors, Mr. Ong said Singapore plans to negotiate air travel bubbles with safe countries or regions such as Hong Kong. The arrangement is meant for general travellers that does not require a controlled itinerary.
At the same time, Singapore will continue to pursue reciprocal green lanes meant for business and official travellers. Mr. Ong also announced that new requirements for travellers are being considered so that they won't have to go through a 2-week stay-home notice.
In particular, we recognize that the requirement of having to serve a full 14-day SHN in a hotel will deter most travellers from wanting to come to Singapore. So we have to facilitate the visits without such an onerous restriction. For example, we can replace the 14-day SHN in a hotel with new requirements, such as a more stringent and a repeated test protocol. Arrival 3 days later, 5 days later, 7 days later, we will study that. We can segregate them from the rest of the community, a process that we call bubble wrapping. And we can closely track their movements while they are here.
Mr. Ong went on to say that COVID-19 has decimated Changi Airport's business, which relies entirely on global traffic. Changi is now the 58th busiest airport for international passenger traffic, down sharply from 7th place before the pandemic. And compared to the start of the year, the airport is serving just 1.5% of its usual passenger volume and 17% of total flights.
Lots to digest from Minister Ong's speech. Now let's bring in news editor Karamjit Kaur to discuss this further. Welcome back, Karam. Now, from setting up a dedicated COVID-19 testing lab to negotiating air travel bubbles and plans to replace SHN for visitors coming here, what is the key message that Mr. Ong wants to put across in his speech?
So for me, the message was very clear that the Singapore Air Hub is under threat, that the situation is very dire, and it is so important for Singapore to do what needs to be done and to put in place the necessary measures to ensure that this, the Singapore Air Hub can start humming along again. If you look at the numbers that he shared in Parliament today, really not looking very good. from being the 7th busiest international airport in the world. Changi is now down to 58. And if you look at the passenger traffic that the airport is now handling, pre-COVID-19, it was bustling. Today, they are doing just about 1.5% of the passenger volumes that used to be handled previously. And same for the number of flights as well. If you look at just passenger flights, Changi is operating just about 6% of the number of flights that it used to operate pre-pandemic. And if you add cargo flights to that, that takes the total a little higher to 17%, but still a far cry from what it used to be.
Well, Karam, you painted a very grim picture. So what can Changi Airport do to bounce back?
So I think it's really about Changi, not just Changi Airport, but also Singapore as a whole. I think Singapore needs to continue on this path, to keep pushing, to keep, communication going with all these countries, whether it's unilateral reopening of our borders or having reciprocal arrangements like the Green Lane, for example, for essential business and government travel. I think that needs to just be work in progress. We may not always get the results immediately, but something that needs to be done. Because, at the end of the day, there's been so much that's been invested in Changi Airport and in the Singapore Air Hub. Took almost 40 years from the time Terminal 1 opened for Changi to build to what it was before COVID-19 hit, and in a matter of just about 6 months, everything literally came, crashing down. All the big plans for Terminal 5, for example, all that has been put on hold for 2 years at least. There were plans for Terminal 2 to be upgraded. That's still happening, but, clearly it's the pace is not going to be as aggressive. So really, we're down to just, if you look at it, just Terminal 1 that's operating as well as Jewel. So the question really is, 40 years almost to build to where it was. 6 months, it all came crashing down. Hopefully, it won't take another 40 years, for Changi to get back to what it was.
And Minister Ong also talked about testing and ramping up testing efforts as well. Now, the dedicated COVID-19 testing lab that'll be set up at the airport in the next few months is to supplement an existing facility there. Karam, how significant is the setting up of this new lab when we already have swabbing capabilities at the airport?
So I think the announcement, for me, it is very significant. As you mentioned, Haranto, we already have a facility at the airport, but that's more for swabbing. And it currently has the capacity to do something like 10,000 swabs a day. But to actually take that one step further, to set up a laboratory at the airport itself, we may well be one of the first or one of the very few airports in the world to do this. And that, I think, shows very clearly that as far as the reopening of the borders is concerned, testing is really going to be the key strategy going forward. Minister Ong talks about testing as being very important to unlock the potential, or to sort of hopefully try and bring back some of the traffic that Changi has lost. And the timing also is good, because if you look at what's been happening on the testing front, there's been a lot of developments. We started out with PCR tests, but those tend to be quite expensive. It's about $200 per test, and quite out of the reach of, I would imagine, normal travelers. But we now, talk about rapid test kits, and these are way cheaper. You can get them for, under $10 per test, and they also are able to produce results very quickly. And he also talks about how we are doing some of these, some of the research is being done here as well in Singapore. A-Star is doing research in this as well. So as we are able to produce more of these tests, and ones that can, produce results very quickly, this will be a key enabler to allow Singapore to reopen its borders.
Let's focus on air travel. Singapore has rolled out different measures, of course, to boost the aviation sector. And with the December holidays coming up, families often traveling overseas, there are, of course, hopes that some form of general travel can soon resume. But Mr. Ong unfortunately said this is not the case. Did it come as a surprise at all?
For me personally, no. I was here just a few days ago. And also, I did mention the fact that if you look at what's being done, what Singapore wants to continue to do, it is really more about bringing travelers into Singapore so that the airport, the air hub can start to move, and that in turn will then provide much needed relief to so many other sectors that depend on aviation, whether it be tourism, hospitality, F&B, and the rest. So even then, there are challenges. Although we do allow travelers to come in, we've recently announced general travel being allowed for travelers from New Zealand, from Brunei. We've added Vietnam to that list, and Australia as well. There still remain restrictions for those residents, because when they go back to their own countries, they do have to still serve the 14-day stay-home notice and also pay to stay in a government facility. So I think that has to happen first. That first step that must happen is for these countries to, allow their residents to visit Singapore and then to return without having to serve quarantine. And I think only after that can we sort of hope to move to the next stage, which is essentially countries allowing Singapore residents to visit those countries. And I think Minister Ong mentioned in Parliament today when he addressed his fellow MPs that, he said, if you're hoping that, I'm going to come and tell you that you can, look forward to your December holidays, I'm sorry, I'll have to disappoint you. So we will have to wait a bit longer. I don't think that's going to happen, not in time for this year-end holidays, I think, at least.
Well, thank you very much, Karam, for coming on to the show. Of course, we've been speaking to news editor at Straits Times, Karamjit Kaur. You can read more on Mr. Ong's ministerial statement in Parliament today on straitstimes.com.
Also in Parliament today, Manpower Minister Josephine Teo said about 9 in 10 eligible employees received a payout upon being laid off, based on official data for the last 6 months. This is despite such compensation not being mandated by law.
Mrs. Teo said that about 84% of this group were given at least 2 weeks' salary per year of service. She was speaking on retrenchment benefits at the Ministry's safeguards against irresponsible retrenchment.
While recognising the usefulness of retrenchment benefit and encouraging employers to pay according to the prevailing norms, we are even more focused on helping retrenched workers return to the workforce. Besides heavy subsidies for skills programs, we provide substantial training and wage support to employers while their new hires undergo conversion programs. During this period, when hiring sentiments have weakened, we have significantly enhanced the support to local job seekers.
Meanwhile, Minister for Social and Family Development Massago Zulkifli told Parliament that action will be taken against those who use retrenchment as a way to avoid fulfilling their contractual obligations. This comes amid concerns about the employment prospects of persons with disabilities amid the pandemic.
If there are any complaints that may arise from their parents or the disabled themselves that they were unfairly treated either through retrenchment or employment practices, MOM as well as SMF will take action. On the efforts of building this spirit of inclusivity in our community is something that we will never get this work done. We will never stop doing this work.
On to the latest COVID-19 situation here. 11 new cases were confirmed today. They included 2 cases in the community and 5 from worker dormitories. There were also 4 imported cases who had been placed on stay-home notices upon their arrival in Singapore. Now, more details will be released tonight.
In other local news, the 4-day hearing on Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong's defamation suit against blogger and financial advisor Leong Zi-hian began today, with Mr. Leong's lawyer Lim Tian arguing that PM Lee had no need to take legal action against his client. Mr. Lim told the High Court that the government had already taken sufficient action to debunk the false allegations made against it. Meanwhile, taking the witness stand in the second half of the defamation hearing, PM Lee said Mr. Leong may not have known that the allegations he shared were false, but he made no attempt to ascertain the truth either way. The hearing continues tomorrow with Dr. Tuan Quang Phan, the expert witness called by PM Lee, giving evidence via video link from Hong Kong.
21 diners have been fined $300 each for flouting COVID-19 measures at F&B outlets, like not wearing a mask promptly after eating or drinking, intermingling between tables, and sitting in groups of more than 5. The breaches were observed in eateries at resorts World Sentosa, Boat Quay and Clarke Quay. In addition, 2 F&B outlets have also been ordered to close for 10 days, while 13 others were fined. Of the 13, one was fined $2,000 for repeat offences, while the remaining 12 were fined $1,000.
Leasing activity for Grade A offices in Singapore remained sluggish during the third quarter of 2020. According to a report by Cushman & Wakefield, Grade A central business districts continued to decline, falling 5.1% quarter-on-quarter to $9.84 per square foot per month. C&W also reported that more tenants with immediate lease expiry are seeking short-term renewals in the face of business uncertainty.
Police said today they are investigating an incident involving a secondary school student who was caught on camera repeatedly hitting his mother. In the video, the Geylang Methodist School student is seen slapping his mother repeatedly as she is heard shouting. When contacted, the school declined to comment, citing that the matter is currently under police investigation.
Moving overseas, US President Donald Trump has returned to the White House after he was hospitalized for 3 days at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center for the coronavirus. Mr. Trump removed his mask and posed for a photo op on the White House balcony before walking inside. He again downplayed the deadly threat of the coronavirus, undermining public health messages of the importance of wearing masks and safe distancing.
And one thing that's for certain, don't let it dominate you. Don't be afraid of it. You're going to beat it. We have the best medical equipment. We have the best medicines, all developed recently. And you're going to beat it. I didn't feel so good. And 2 days ago, I could have left 2 days ago. 2 days ago, I felt great, like better than I have in a long time. I said just recently, better than 20 years ago. Don't let it dominate. Don't let it take over your lives. Don't let that happen. We have the greatest country in the world. We're going back to work. We're going to be out front. As your leader, I had to do that. I knew there's danger to it, but I had to do it. I stood out front. I led. Nobody that's a leader would not do what I did. And I know there's a risk, there's a danger, but that's okay. And now I'm better, and maybe I'm immune. I don't know.
Responding to Mr. Trump, Democratic nominee Joe Biden criticized his remarks at a NBC News town hall in Miami, saying, quote, "I would hope that the president, having gone through what he went through, would communicate the right lesson to the American people. Masks matter."
Despite almost daily disclosures of new COVID-19 infections among US President Donald Trump's close associates, the White House has decided not to trace the contacts of guests and staff members at the Rose Garden celebration 10 days ago. The event for Judge Amy Coney Barrett is a likely potential superspreader hotspot where at least 8 people, including the president, may have become infected. The White House has instead limited its efforts to notifying people who came in close contact with Mr. Trump just in the 2 days before his diagnosis.
Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam said today there will be no further relaxation of COVID-19 restrictions in the city for the time being. Measures due to expire on Thursday are staying in place, including limiting gatherings to no more than 4 people. Mrs. Lam argued that there was still evidence of silent pockets of infection, since more than half of the cases discovered since September 30th were of unknown origin. And those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Dylan Ang. Join us tomorrow for more stories on A Big Story.